best piece of advice that I could give you is to go in with a curiosity mindset. This is going to give you a lot of information to use in that big boss interview.
Being the team member already working there, you want somebody who's going to respect you. You want somebody who's going to value you. You want somebody who's going to see themselves as equal, right? Not going to position themselves above anybody else. Welcome back to the Career Advancement Academy. I'm Jack. This is Kara, and we are your favorite career coaches diving into another topic today to help you further your career. And this month, we've been talking all things interviews. Kara, what did we talk about last week?
Last week, it was your insider guide to all things recruiters.
I think that was a fantastic conversation and so needed in the job search of today. But this week we've got another awesome topic. We're talking from peer to panel, how to excel in various types of interviews. If you're in the interview process looking for your next job, you're going to want to pay attention because the interview process is not like it used to be before. There are so many different ways this process is getting done right now.
I know, and it's really kind of interesting. If you have been in a job search over the last few years, or if you're in one now, you probably have been on one of these types of interviews, or you might not be aware of how long this hiring process could take. In fact, as of Q1 of this year, 2023, the average hiring process for companies is 44 days.
44 days, and that's the average?
That's the average. And that's the average. We've had clients that have gone through massively long hiring processes with companies that take months. And in fact, according to an article at CNBC, there's no specific formula for the acceptable number of interviews, but the average is that 3 to 5 rounds of interviews is the norm for non-managerial positions.
Wait. Say that again.
3 to 5 rounds of interviews for non-managerial positions. That means the higher you go up in your careers, you could be facing multiple rounds of interviews over months in order to secure a job, or go through all of that and not even get the offer.
I think this is definitely a needed conversation then.
Mm-hmm. And my thoughts aside on how the hiring process is a little bit broken and we need to be slimming this down, what we want to be doing today for you as the job seeker and as the individual is help prepare you. The first thing that we want to give you to make sure that you are prepared is access to our past episodes, first and foremost, because of the fact is that a traditional job search is slamming those resumes into the job board, really only give you about a 1 to 2% chance of landing an interview. And if you are only focused on one interview cycle at a time, this is going to really elongate your search. And we've seen this time and time again with clients who really focus all their time and energy on one hiring process, which could take months, don't get the offer, and then they have to go and start again and again. And if you're coupling 44 days back to back, right, that's 6 weeks on average.
Wow.
Right? And you're only focusing on one at a time. All of a sudden, just to go through 3 interview processes, you're looking at a minimum of 4 to 5 months. And that's a lot, right? So what is the first piece of advice? Make sure that you are generating multiple interview processes, multiple opportunities at a given time. So that's the first thing. The second thing is we want to make sure that you are prepared for all the different types of interview processes that you might be going through. So first and foremost, recruiter screens. We talked about that last week. Definitely make sure to get recruiters on your side in this process so that you can get to the next hiring stages and the next interviews. And we're going to be talking about them now.
So what I have to understand, what are the different types of interviews that we could run into? Just let's kind of lay them out on the table so people understand what they might be running into.
Absolutely. So the obvious ones are you're going to be talking to recruiters, right? Then the next step would make sense that you go and you talk to your future boss, which is what we call the hiring manager interview. The next step could potentially be you're going to talk to your future boss's boss. We call that the decision maker interview, right? So, because at the end of the day, if your future boss wants to hire you, but their boss doesn't want to, they're going to be the decision maker. So, those are going to be the main typical types of interviews that you're going to face no matter what. But you're also going to be facing potentially a peer interview.
Okay.
Peer interview is going to be someone that is on your team that is an equal to you. Lumped into that, I also include team member interviews. So, for instance, if you're going to be a leader, you're going to be managing a team, someone who reports to you. Other interviews are going to be panel interviews where you are meeting with a group of people.
Mm.
And then the last type of, or actually, we have two other types that you might not face and are a little bit more rare, but we want to touch on them shortly, is a case study interview. These are used more specifically in consulting. And then one-way recorded interviews, which you may have come across if you are playing that job board junkie game, which is going to be with that recruiter very initially at the very top, which is recording yourself answering a couple of questions. And we're going to touch on all of these types very quickly. I know we have a lot to cover, so Jack, should we just dump into it?
I think we should. And it seems like, what's the first step? What do we do to prepare ourselves for really what we're going to be facing here?
Right. So what we're going to do, Jack and Kara, what we're going to do for each and every one of these is we're going to tell you what these people that you're going to be interviewing with, what do they want? The reason why I do this and why I really feel very strongly about this is when you can get into the mind of who you're going to be interviewing, you all of a sudden become a lot more knowledgeable, strategic, and powerful in that interview. And it also helps you think more strategically. So let's talk first and foremost about that hiring manager interview. Jack, when you're going into a hiring manager interview and you're a job seeker, what does that hiring manager want in that interview?
Well, I think that hiring manager for sure wants somebody who can do the job, right? They want to know you're going to come in and you're going to be able to just keep things moving. But they also already have a team in place. So you need to make sure that you are fitting in with that team. I would think that that's got to be another priority for them. But also, they don't just want somebody who's just going to be there. They want somebody who's actually going to get them to where they want to go. So most likely they're going to want somebody who's going to drive results and from their past, and somebody who's going to be able to bring those results into that current position. So long story short, you're making an impact, right?
Exactly. So let's talk about how you can prepare for the hiring manager interview and how you can really capitalize on the fact that this hiring manager, they want someone who can do the job, they want someone who can fit in with the team, and most importantly, can bring results. The biggest piece of advice here, right, is going to be with that recruiter screen. They want to make sure you can fit in with the company. You're going to want to make sure you can fit in with that department and you can actually make an impact. That hiring manager is going to be asking you questions specifically about that role. And if you are thinking about this strategically, every question that they ask you is going to be indicative of a problem that they're facing, a need that they have, or an obstacle that they need to overcome or that you need to overcome in that interview, because it's important. They're not going to be wasting their time asking you a question that doesn't relate to their needs that they have. So how can you best prepare? One, make sure you know your results. Make sure you know your stories. Make sure you know the impact that you can bring. The best way to do this is having a resume that is results oriented and having those bullet points be in that story formula so that you can expand on them in the STAR formula. If you don't know what that STAR formula is, check out our YouTube page. We have a whole video on that. Telling your stories in a short, concise framework that ends in a result that hopefully has a metric is going to make sure that you're more memorable and leave a lasting impression. Additionally, this hiring manager might bring up objections and they might ask you questions that are different from the job description. right? We've already talked about in previous episodes how the job description that's being posted might have been written by someone who is not the hiring manager. So asking questions like, what are you really looking for in this role? How can I be the most successful hire you've ever had? What are your goals for the first 30, 60, 90 days for someone in this role is going to help giving you an idea of what they are really looking for. These are the types of questions that you're going to want to ask so that you are finding out more information about what that hiring manager truly wants.
I think this is going to be so key because so often we're so just drawn to the job description, right? It's oh, I need to match this job description, but until we really find out from the hiring manager what their struggles are, what their focus is, we really shouldn't dive too hard into pitching ourselves to the job description.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So we have a whole episode on the elevator pitch. We have a whole YouTube video on the STAR formula. So these are tools that can help you out in the hiring manager interview. But again, these questions that the hiring manager interview is going to ask you are probably going to be less behavioral, more situational, more wanting to know about your history, and more specifically about asking stories about what you've done and how they relate to how you can make an impact at the organization. So keep that in mind. Other questions that you're going to want to bring up are learning about the hiring manager themselves. What are their leadership style? Tell me about the structure of the team. Tell me about who my key stakeholders are. Your goal truly is to learn as much as you possibly can about what they want in the role, how you fit into the organization, how the team operates and how the leader operates, and so that you can have as much information, because at the end of the day, and I'm going to remind you because sometimes people forget, this is a mutually beneficial decision that you're trying to make, not you going in a desperation mode saying, oh, give me a job, I'll do whatever you want.
I can do that.
Right? It's you saying, is this the right fit for me as well? So you need to get your answers as well.
And I think a good hiring manager would really appreciate a good conversationalist, somebody who has questions prepared, somebody who really has done their homework on what the company does, really wanting to learn more and not just say, oh yeah, just pick me. Right?
Exactly. And Jack illuminated a good point, which is do your research. Have your research done. Now, you obviously have some information from talking to the recruiter about the company, etc., but do your research on the individual. Look at their LinkedIn profile. Look at where their career has gone and what brought them to this company, right? When you can build that rapport and you can have that great relationship from the get-go with that interviewer, that's going to go a long way too, right? At the end of the day, the unspoken part of this is that people like to work with people that they like. And so when you can do that research and you can build that relationship and build that rapport, as well as showing your impact and your results, that's going to go a long way as well.
I love it. I think we've pretty much kind of covered the hiring manager. On to the decision makers.
The decision maker. So decision maker, this is going to be your boss's boss, right? So this is going to be, if they don't like you, they don't think you can do the job, they don't think you can make an impact, regardless if that hiring manager likes you or not, you're not going to get hired, right? Most of the time, though, this is really just going to be a check, yes or no. Yep, approved. If the hiring manager likes you, this is really just going to be the final sign off. Mm-hmm. What does the decision maker need or want to know about you in this interview, Jack?
I think the decision maker really wants to kind of know that you understand the role. They want to know how you fit as a part of the team that you're going to be looking to join, and also how it fits within the larger picture of what the department, the division, what the company's trying to accomplish with their goals in the big picture. So that's why it's so important to do our research, right? Because then we can tie in our knowledge of the organization, of the role that we've gathered throughout this process from the recruiter, from the hiring manager, to then relay how the information we have, how it relates to that larger picture. And then that allows us to solidify how we can make an impact.
Exactly, right? This is usually the final stop on a hiring process. So most likely, if there is going to be peer interviews or panel interviews or any of that other stuff, you're doing this before the decision maker. If it's a more streamlined process, you're going to do this right after the hiring manager. Here is going to be my best tip, and I have never said this on social media or anywhere else, so this is a first tip only for you listeners here at the podcast and my clients who have paid me for this advice before. So, golden nugget, you ready?
Golden nugget. Let's go.
Okay. This is how I like to view the decision maker interview. It brings me back to a time when I used to play Donkey Kong, that video game. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So when I used to play this on Super Nintendo back in the day, they used to have sort of like chapters of levels.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And at the end, there was a big boss that you had to beat, right?
Always
Okay.
a big boss.
Right. Well, throughout the levels, like there would be like 10 levels and then a big boss. Throughout the levels, you almost sort of gain these skills that you would use to beat the big boss at the end, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I sort of think of the hiring process in the same way. So when you are going through all of the other interviews, the decision maker is the big boss at the end, right? So how do we use this, right? The information that you're gathering in the other interviews is what you're going to be using to defeat the big boss, quote unquote, right? to use in the interview. Why are we using this analogy? What I like to do is we go back to what the decision maker wants. The decision maker wants to know that you understand the role, that you understand how the role fits into the larger picture, right? The department, the division, the company, and wants you to know that you understand how you're going to make an impact at the organization, right? So what could happen is you could go in, you could handle the interview the same way that you've handled every other interview. Tell me about yourself. You go through your whole spiel, you answer their questions, et cetera, et cetera. Or you could go in, they go, tell me a little bit about yourself. And you go, I would love to. Here's a little bit about myself. And in fact, I've really enjoyed learning so much about the organization and the role from speaking with the hiring manager and my peers in the panel. In fact, I'd love to tell you a little bit about what I've learned about the role. And after I'm done, I'd love to hear from you if I'm on point with what you're looking for in this role. And if you could tell me where I may have missed anything when it comes to aligning this role to your goals. Why is this such a powerful interview move? You take 2 minutes, you explain what you've heard when it comes to the challenges, the opportunities, the goals, when it comes to your stakeholders, your peers, your teams, the hiring managers, all this other stuff. And then you turn it back on him and say, what have I missed? And can we make sure that we're in alignment here? This is a power move because you're showing that decision maker, one, you can summarize a large amount of information that you've gathered over the last days, weeks, etc., into a short, concise, and professional summary, right? That's the first thing, which is not an easy thing to do. So if you can pull this off, really impressive. Two, you're not wasting their time. So you could waste their time. Maybe you only have a half hour and you're covering some of the same stuff that was covered in peer interviews, panel interviews, the hiring manager interviews, and you're wasting your time and their time. And you're now saving your time to focus on what that decision maker really, truly wants. And now that interview with you is now completely different than any interview that decision maker has had with their competition. You've now saved yourself both times, and you can get really to the heart of the matter, which is strategy, their issues and their challenges that they're facing, and how you can solve it. So that's what I always really, really love to do for decision maker interviews, is make sure that you're, one, taking notes at all of the other interviews that you've been at. You truly have a good grasp on the role and how it makes an impact. You know what the opportunities of the role is and what some of the challenges of the department and the division are. And you can easily convey that so that you can make sure that you are also executing on the decision maker's goals and are in alignment with them should you get hired.
This just blew my mind because this really kind of takes everything that you've done prior in the job search and makes it so much more important.
Mm-hmm.
It highlights the importance of networking almost. It highlights the importance of having questions for recruiters to learn more. It highlights the importance of having that ping pong back and forth with the hiring manager to learn more in their perspective instead of just being that person who says, yeah, I can do that, or just being that person who's just trying to get through the process and not necessarily trying to figure out the information. This is the masterclass to be able to showcase that you've understood, you've digested, and you're also looking for clarity. You're looking for their input. I love this.
And what you're doing is you're being the consultative interviewee, right? You're
taking a consultative approach.
Yeah.
You're learning more. You're being like a consultant, how a consultant would be if they were going in to service a potential client, because you need to understand what the client's needs are before we can ever offer a solution.
Correct. And that's going to set you apart, because most people, from doing this time and time again, most people go into interviews, one, nervous or scared. Two, they put themselves in the submissive position and they allow that interviewer to be in that authoritative position instead of a equal position, right? And three, they don't take the time to truly figure out if it's a good fit for them. They end up pretzeling themselves or changing themselves or whatever in order to go into an interview in more of a desperate sort of energy. I'll do it. Yeah, I could do that. Or sure. Now what you're doing is you're taking your power back, and you're doing it in a strategic and authentic way to really determine what's best, not only for you, but for the company. And that goes a very long way with executives and decision makers.
I would say so, especially with the statistic from Glassdoor that says 70% of executives say that cultural fit is crucial during the decision maker interview.
Yeah. And that's another thing, right? So the decision makers are also making sure that you're a good fit for the company as well. And if you're doing your due diligence to show them that you are, it's a no-brainer, right?
I love being a no-brainer. It makes the decisions easy.
Yeah.
So I guess we've kind of wrapped up decision maker interviews. It's time to talk about peer.
Yeah, let's talk about some of the other interviews that are a little less common, but might come up, and I want you to be prepared. So peer or team interviews. So what are they looking for? What are peers looking for?
I would think if I was ever on an interview and I was somebody's peer, I would probably want somebody who's there to kind of help, somebody who wants to be part of the team, somebody who sees themselves as part of the team. But also, being the team member already working there, you want somebody who's going to respect you. You want somebody who's going to value you. We want somebody who's going to see themselves as equal, right? Not going to position themselves above anybody else.
Right, exactly. And if you are a leader and you're interviewing someone who's going to be on your team, they want someone who's going to be a good boss, right? And both, right? Whether it's a teammate or someone who you're going to be leading, they want good communication. They want good collaboration. Just like Jack said, you're about to not just enter a boss-employee relationship, but you're going to be embarking on a team relationship, right? You are joining a group of people. And these people, they want understanding, they want respect, they want communication, they want collaboration, and they want to make sure that you're going to be joining this and not disrupting the culture, right? So these peer and team interviews, the best piece of advice that I could give you is to go in with a curiosity mindset. This is going to give you a lot of information to use in that big boss interview. Right. So when it comes to peers, and potential team interviews, what I always like to ask people when you're interviewing and you have the time to ask questions is, what are you working on? What are some of the projects that you're working on? Right. So that you can kind of know what are some of the day-to-day projects that they're working on. You can also ask, what are some of the struggles working on in this team that you're trying to overcome? What are some of the goals that you have for the end of the year? What are some of the teams that you work most closely with? When you're interviewing people who are going to be your future employees, what I always like to ask is, how do you best like to be communicated with, right? What did your last boss do really well that you like? that you would like to see continued? What are some areas that you would really like to have improved in this team, right? So those are some things that I would also like to ask, or some of the other things that I would ask are, what are some projects that you love working on? What are some of the projects that you do just because you have to?
Mm.
These are some of the things that you can build upon so that you get to know the people who are on your team, whether you're leading them or not, in kind of a personal way, when you get to realize how people work and how people don't. And you also get to learn about the team dynamics, what the boss's leadership is a little bit, some of the opportunities, some of the projects, and all of that other good stuff as well.
I think really along those lines, it's a less formal, and it's really more about building the compatibility, the relationship, and gathering information really to be able to use later.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
With this, when they ask you questions, it's absolutely okay to answer in the start interview format as well. But it's going to be, like Jack said, it's a little bit more informal, right? Like these are your peers. You're not trying to impress them or take their job. You're more just trying to figure out, hey, can we work together? Can we get stuff done? Can we collaborate? And what are you working on? How can I help? Right. And another great question that just popped into mind is, hey, how could someone in this role best make your job just a little bit easier, right? Something like that.
It's a great question.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, what do you want out of this interview? That's a great question. Is you want them to go back to the hiring manager and the decision maker to say, you gotta hire Jack. He was great. Having him on this team is going to make our lives so much better, right? Instead of your competition is like, oh, you don't want to hire that person. Oh, kind of a dull person, right? So that's kind of the end goal for those types of interviews.
I love that as kind of the understanding of the just how you want, where you want that process to end, where you want to take it.
Yeah, love that. Okay, panel interviews. This is where you're meeting a group of people. Jack, who are we meeting? What's the goal? What are they thinking?
Well, in a panel interview, usually you're going to have a lot of stakeholders, potential collaborators, and really, I guess the fact that they're stakeholders, it's collaboration is going to be key. What they want is they want somebody who's going to be able to understand that they're valuable, and they want to be included. They don't want you to focus on any one person. They're there for a reason. They were sent to be there, so include them in the process. Don't just focus in on one person, but also they want you to be able to understand your role as it is relating to that. They want to feel seen and heard as much as you want to feel seen and heard. And so it's very important to not leave anyone out during a panel interview.
Absolutely. That is probably the biggest thing, right? It almost feels like we're back in school, like, oh, no one wants to be left out. But that's truly one of the biggest things. Because think about it. They're thinking about you in that role, and how you interact in a group is how you're going to interact around a conference table, right? Are you going to leave me out? Are you going to leave my projects and my initiatives out? Are you going to consider my goals and my things that I'm really passionate about, right? So when they're asking you questions and you're communicating with them, really one of the things to just keep in mind, and it seems kind of silly, but you just don't want to leave someone out. And very easy ways to do this is literally looking every single person in their eye as you're answering questions, right? Instead of just focusing on one person. Even if that one person asked you that question, respond to them, but also go and look at other people as you're answering. Another good way is to truly actively listen to what some of their concerns are as they're bringing it up. So if you can include that in an answer, that's even better, right? So if someone asks you a question about how you would attack a 90-day plan or something like that, you can always say, one of the things that I would do in the first 30 days is I would really make sure that we tackle this low-hanging fruit that Susie brought up, right? Something like that. Really making sure that you're integrating and taking into account all of the things that everyone is bringing up. The other thing is that you truly, the biggest piece of advice that I would say is be your authentic self. Yeah. If you are trying to put on a mask or put on a show or pretzel yourself into some other version to appease someone on the panel, you're going to end up pissing off someone else on the panel. It just truly is what it is. And so this is your opportunity to be who you are and answer honestly, right? Still use the STAR framework, still be who you are, be friendly and inclusive and collaborative, but be who you are. The final piece of advice that I would say here is ask a question to everyone. Oh. This is going to be either individual questions to everyone, or if you are out of time, if you only have 5 minutes, right? I would say in the last couple of minutes, if you could please tell me how we could best collaborate together in this role, right? But really your goal here, right? The end goal is to figure out, how does this role collaborate and work with each person on this panel? What are each person's goals, and what are they most passionate about in their roles, right? And what are some of their pain points that you in your role would help them overcome? And that's something that you can incorporate in your answers. You can incorporate back in a hiring manager interview or a decision maker interview. And it's also stuff that you can incorporate in your customized thank you notes afterwards, which will also set you apart.
I love this approach because so often in panel interviews, we just get a little anxious, we get hyper focused, and we want to do a good job. But when we want to do a good job, the lens tends to shrink. And when the lens shrinks, we're not thinking of full awareness of who are we leaving out.
Exactly.
Love it.
Yeah. Okay, so those are the most common interviews that you're going to probably experience throughout the hiring process, but I want to touch on just 2 more.
There's more?
There's more. So we're going to do this very, very quickly for interest of time, but if you have these coming up, I hope this is valuable. The first one is case study interviews. These are also similar to technical interviews, and so I'm going to give you my proprietary framework that I came up with in order to help you pass your case study or technical interview. The reason why I said it like this is because we want you to pass PASSS your case study interview. So that what is that called?
An acronym.
Just blanked on that. That acronym is going to help you remember the framework and what they're really looking for in a case study interview. So what does someone want in a case study interview? They want to understand your strategic mindset. They want to understand the way you think, your problem awareness, your action orientation, and most specifically, your problem solving and thought process. So some of the key tips here are, when you are doing a case study interview, talk through your thought process. Okay. A lot of times they're going to give you a whiteboard or they're going to give you a problem, and they're not going to give you a lot of information. And that's on purpose. It's because they want to hear you think through the process and what you would do in order to find additional information, what questions you would ask, etc. And you can use whatever tools they give you. And I highly recommend that you do, whether it's a whiteboard, pieces of paper, the interviewer themselves for questions, etc. So to pass, PASSS, your case study interview, first thing, what's P, Jack?
Problem awareness.
Okay, they're looking for problem awareness. Fully understand the problem. That's the first step. Ask specific clarifying questions to ensure that you have a full grasp of the problem. This is really, really critical. A lot of times, specifically at consulting firms, they're going to give you a problem that is very generic, very vague, and they're doing that because they want to hear you ask for clarifying questions, okay? What's number 2?
Number 2, that's an A, and that's assumption identification.
Got it. So articulate an initial hypothesis. Wow, we got a lot of crazy words today.
Putting the wrong emphasis on the wrong syllables today.
So assumption identification. So what is your assumption? What's your assumption or your hypothesis of the problem? Identify any underlying assumptions or any missing critical pieces while you're doing this, right? So here's my hypothesis, assuming that all these things are true, okay? What is the first S?
I think it's going to be summarizing the problem.
So summarizing the specific issue and your findings after the discovery phases. So after you've asked your clarifying questions, after you've assumed all of your assumptions, right? This is my hypothesis, assuming that all these things are true, you're going to summarize what's going on. Then what's the next S?
It's stating our recommendations.
Perfect. You're going to then state what you recommend, your answer, right? This is the solution that I recommend, and you're going to try and structure your analysis very clearly and logically, right? Finally,
steps and results.
Okay, you're going to outline your steps, right? So at the very beginning, you're getting a problem. You're going to ask some questions to make sure that you fully understand the problem. Then you're going to make some assumptions, assuming that all these things are true. This is my hypothesis. You're going to summarize to make sure that you have clear understanding of everything. Then you're going to state your recommendations, and then you're going to outline it into some steps. This would make sense if it's a 30, 60, 90 day. If it makes sense, your forecasted results would also be included in this. And you're going to walk through your interviewer through your thought process and explain any additional assumptions that might come up as this goes. Okay. That's a case study interview at its very simplest framework. A lot of tip here is that a lot of times you're going to be timed. You might only have 60 minutes to do this. This is why this PASSS framework is the easiest way to tackle a case study interview, is because it's high level. It doesn't mean you have to solve the problem and implement world peace in 60 minutes, right? You're just getting the problem, making sure that you're clarifying it, you're stating your assumptions and your hypothesis, you're stating your recommendations, and the general overview of steps of how you would implement and get the results for it, right?
I love this. The pass your case study interviews. I love this as a acronym to make sure that we're checking these boxes as we go through this process.
Absolutely. And if you have a case study interview coming up, I know we went through that fast, pause, rewind, and make sure you write down the pass, okay? All right, wrapping up, one-way recorded interviews. This is some new technology stuff that has come out.
I am really, really interested to understand how to better kind of handle these situations where we're just us and the Zoom or us and the recorder, because anxiety just seems to get the best of us there.
Anxiety does get the best of us here, right? So a lot of times this is the first initial step before we even get to the recruiter. It's kind of rare. I don't see this very often. If someone is in a very long job search, you maybe only get this once. But a lot of times this is implemented by companies to help weed you out before you even get to the recruiter. It usually states about 2 to 5 questions. And what happens is you get into the system, you get the question, and you have about a minute to record an answer. The good news is that if you haven't gone through this, most times you have the opportunity to re-record your answer. Most of the time, it's like 80% of the time you get the chance to do this, if not 100, I'm not sure. Most of the time you can either re-record your answer as many times as you want, or you get the chance to re-record it once. Here is my biggest recommendation. Take the opportunity to re-record if you mess up, okay? However, most times when I talk to people who've done this, and because I am also someone who records videos and TikToks and all that other stuff a lot, most times your first shot is usually your best shot, but you can't go back and get your first shot. So with all of this stuff being said, here's what I recommend. Look at the question, formulate your answer, write down some notes if you need to, some bullet point notes, and then take a deep breath, drop your shoulders, take a couple more deep breaths, hit record, smile, and just go for it, okay? Here's what they're looking for. They are looking for things that we don't know, right? They're looking for specific personality types that fit into their culture. They're looking for specific types of answers. They're looking for cultural fits, company fits, fits for the job description, and they're looking for no red flags. So biggest recommendation here is make sure to avoid the common red flags, like, just very, very egregious red flag answers. Just don't do those, and you will know exactly what they are. But also, just be yourself. We don't know what they're looking for except for what's in the job description. So try to make sure that your answers are relevant to your experience, to your skills, whatever is in the job description, if possible, and be yourself.
I think really what they're looking for here is concise, clear, courteous answers, right? They want a professional candidate. And if you're struggling and you're not necessarily sure what the best practices are for in-person versus these virtual interviews, check out our YouTube channel. Kara's dropping a video tomorrow talking about the in-person versus virtual interview best practices. And really, once you kind of watch that video, you're going to have a little bit better kind of tips around how to handle this kind of process.
Absolutely. You want to make sure that you are looking professional, articulating professionally, and your background is as professional as possible. And I'll have a lot of tips for you tomorrow in that video.
Make sure you implement these interview strategies in your next interview process. For more in-depth information, make sure to pay attention to our upcoming emails, our YouTube channels, and our TikToks, because we're always dropping information there as well. If you found today's episode helpful, please share this episode with your friends, your colleagues. Your feedback means a lot to us, and it helps others discover the Career Advancement Academy. If you enjoyed the show, please also just take a moment, subscribe to our podcast, leave us a 5-star review as well on your favorite podcasting platform. Next week, we're going to be talking about something different. What's our topic next week?
Next week, we're still going to be talking about interviews, but this is really critical. We're going to be talking about how to wrap up the interview to make sure that you're securing that next step, overcoming objections, and landing the offer.
I can't wait, because we all want the offer.
Absolutely. Stay tuned. Have a great week. And be good.